Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever looked into the eyes of someone who claims to love you and realized they are actually in love with a person who, you know, doesn't exist? It is one of the most profound and quietest heartbreaks a human being can experience. We spend our lives building a masterpiece, a version of ourselves that is palatable, kind, successful, and composed. We present this masterpiece to the world, and when the world applauds, well, we feel a fleeting sense of pride. But shortly after, a cold realization sets in. They aren't clapping for you. They are clapping for the costume. This is the essence of the mask paradox. Softly, as if sharing a secret, we are conditioned from a very young age to believe that our raw, unfiltered selves are either too much or simply not enough. So, we learn to edit. We learn to perform. Philosophical, we become architects of our own deception, constructing a persona that ensures our safety and our social standing. Weighty and serious, but there is a heavy price to pay for this security. Empathetic and slow, it leads to a specific kind of existential loneliness, the kind where you can be surrounded by friends, family, and partners, yet feel like an invisible stranger in your own life. Pensive, you begin to wonder, if you are being celebrated for your virtues, or simply for your ability to hide your flaws. Deeply empathetic, it's a wearying way to live, constantly maintaining the borders of a self that feels more like a prison than a home. Quietly intense, we find ourselves trapped in a cycle where the more we are loved for the mask, the more we fear showing the face beneath it. Whispering a hard truth, because if they love the why, they must surely hate the truth. Slow and mysterious, this brings us to a haunting question that we often avoid in the quiet hours of the night. Philosophical inquiry: is true intimacy even possible in a world where we have been taught to prioritize our safety over our visibility? Softly, with deep vulnerability, if we never dare to be truly seen, are we simply doomed to be loved for who we are not, forever hiding the only version of ourselves that actually needs to be held? Warm and inviting, ladies and gentlemen, today we peel back the layers of this internal architecture to see if it's possible to finally step out from behind the mask. Calm and inviting, ladies and gentlemen, you see, we often think of wearing a mask as a conscious act of deception, but for many of us, it is a survival mechanism wrapped in the beautiful ribbon of excellence. Reflective, this is the exhausting performance of perfection, Authoritative but gentle. In psychology, we refer to this as impression management, the relentless, subconscious filtering of our rawest faults and darkest fears to ensure that the image we project remains untarnished. Sorrowful, it is the art of being fine when your world is crumbling, the discipline of staying composed when you are screaming inside, and the heavy burden of being the one who has it all together. For those of you who find yourselves in the role of the healer or the fixer, roles so many of you have been conditioned to inhabit, this performance becomes more than a habit. It becomes an identity. You are the pillar of strength, the one who listens but is rarely heard, the one who carries everyone's burdens, while your own sit heavy and unacknowledged in your chest. You've become so proficient at managing the emotions of those around you that you've forgotten how to inhabit your own. You fear that if you show a single crack, if you show one moment of unacceptable weakness, the entire structure you've built for your family, your friends, and your career will come crashing down. But there is a
devastating psychological toll to being the person who never breaks. When you never allow yourself to be seen in your mess, you see, you are essentially confirming your own deepest fear that your authentic, struggling self is unlovable. You create a prison of isolation where you are surrounded by people who love a version of you that doesn't actually exist. You are praised for your resilience, but you are starving for a connection that doesn't require you to be strong. This constant filtering creates a profound sense of loneliness in a crowded room, where the more perfect you appear, the more invisible you actually feel. Well, think about the sheer cognitive energy it takes to maintain that veneer every single day. It's like holding a heavy weight at arm's length. Eventually, your muscles begin to tremble, and the strain becomes unbearable. We tell ourselves we are protecting our loved ones, or perhaps protecting ourselves from judgment. But we must ask ourselves the most difficult question of all, right? What if the very shield you built to protect your heart is actually the thing starving it? Ladies and gentlemen, you see, we have arrived at what I call the visibility trade-off, a fundamental law of human connection that, well, most of us spend our entire lives trying to circumvent. We want to be seen, yet we are terrified of being watched. We want to be loved, but we are desperate to remain safe. The core truth is this: true connection requires a trade-off. You cannot have absolute safety and absolute visibility at the same time. When we wear these masks, and let's face it, we all do, we do so because they provide a sanctuary. They act as a psychological buffer against the sting of rejection. We tell ourselves that if someone dislikes the mask, it doesn't really hurt, because they haven't actually rejected us. They've simply rejected the character we've chosen to play. But here is the tragedy of that arrangement, ladies and gentlemen. Masks cannot be loved. Only humans can. When you are praised for a performance, you don't feel seen, right? You feel like a successful imposter. If someone falls in love with your polished, curated exterior, that love never actually reaches your heart. It hits the mask and bounces off, leaving the person underneath just as starved and lonely as they were before. To be truly known is a risk, not a final destination. It is a continuous and often frightening act of courage.
If you never risk being misunderstood for who you are, you will never experience the profound, soul-deep relief of being accepted for your messy, unpolished truth. We must accept a difficult reality. I mean, being misunderstood by the wrong people is the non-negotiable price of being understood by the right ones. You have to be willing to let the people who don't speak your language, well, walk away, so that the ones who do can finally find you. But this brings us to a terrifying realization. If the mask is what we've used to survive for so long, what happens when we finally try to take it off? Because as it turns out, the mask doesn't just hide you from the world. It might be doing something much more dangerous. It might be hiding you from yourself. And that, you see, is where the paradox becomes a prison. Ladies and gentlemen, you see, we have reached a crossroad. If the mask is a prison, then you, yes, you, must become the architect of your own liberation. But how do we dismantle a structure that has been our only shelter for years? Ladies and gentlemen, the journey toward authenticity isn't about burning the mask
step in this protocol, well, it's to identify your primary mask. We all have a specific trait we perform to ensure we are accepted, or perhaps just left alone. For some, it is the mask of the fixer, the person who manages everyone else's crisis so that no one has the chance to look closely at their own. For others, it is the mask of the happy one. You know, the person whose constant, radiant smile is actually a no-entry sign, preventing anyone from seeing the exhaustion underneath. These masks, they were not created out of malice, right? They were created for safety. You performed these roles because, at one point in your life, they were the only way you knew how to be loved. But once you recognize the mask, you must begin the practice of micro-vulnerability. This is not about a grand, dramatic confession or revealing your deepest traumas to the world. It is the quiet, brave act of admitting a small, non-catastrophic insecurity to someone you trust. It is saying, I'm actually a bit nervous about this. Well, I don't really have the answer to that. These are small cracks in the armor you see, designed to show you that the world does not crumble when you are less than perfect. You are testing the ground, proving to your nervous system that you can be seen and still be safe. This leads to the most profound internal shift, moving from a mindset of performance to a mindset of presence. Most of us walk through our lives as if we are on a stage, under a harsh, unforgiving spotlight. We are constantly asking ourselves, how do I look to them? Am I playing the part? Are they convinced? The architect of authenticity changes the question entirely. Instead of monitoring the audience, you must begin to monitor the performer. Stop asking, how do I look? And start asking, how do I feel right now? Are your shoulders tight? Is your smile forced? Is your heart actually in this conversation? Authenticity is rarely a loud or explosive event. No, it is the quiet, persistent act of stopping the performance. It is the moment you decide that being real is more important than being liked.
However, there is a reason we find this so difficult. As we begin to step out from behind the curtain, we often encounter a new and unexpected shadow. Because when you finally stop performing for the crowd, you realize that some people were only there for the show. And that leads us, ladies and gentlemen, to the most difficult question of all. What happens to your life when the audience leaves and you are left standing alone in the light of your own truth? Ladies and gentlemen, there is a profound, almost spiritual relief that comes when the stage lights finally dim and you realize, well, you no longer have to perform. You see, we spend so much of our lives terrified that if the mask slips, we will be rejected. But here is the secret that psychology often whispers but rarely shouts. The goal of a well-lived life isn't to be liked by everyone. It's to be truly seen by a few. When you stop curating your identity to fit the expectations of the crowd, well, the crowd may indeed thin out. But those who remain, they aren't there for the costume, right? They are there for the soul behind it. To be truly known is to find a sanctuary where you can finally exhale, knowing that your flaws aren't deal breakers, but rather the very features that make your humanity beautiful. We have traveled together today from the safety of the mask, that rigid protective shell, to the terrifying yet beautiful freedom of the human face. It is a journey from isolation in plain sight to genuine, unfiltered connection. You know, it takes immense courage to be misunderstood by the many so that you can finally be understood by the right people. Ladies and gentlemen,
As we close this exploration into the mask paradox, I want to invite you to reflect. Which mask have you been wearing most recently? Is it the mask of the always happy friend, the perfect professional, or perhaps the indestructible stoic? Encouragingly, share your reflections in the comments below. I mean, your vulnerability might be the very thing someone else needs to feel seen today. If you found value in this journey through the landscapes of the mind, I invite you to join our community of deep thinkers. Inviting, subscribe to Mindscapes Explored as we continue to peel back the layers of the human experience and search for the truth beneath the surface. Until next time, stay curious and stay true to the person behind the mask.